my 4 golden rules that you are absolutely aware of. These rules serve two purposes. One, it helps you take educated guesses when you don't know what the question is. And two, it reinforces an answer that you would have known but might be confused because of the stress of the exam. There are 4 golden rules. Number 1, democratic mandate. Number 2, federal balance. And 3 and 4, which are generally studied together, separation of powers and checks and balances. Every concept, right from the preamble to the very last article of the Constitution, is justified on these 4 golden rules. Let's start with rule number 1, democratic mandate. Democratic mandate says if you want to perform a democratic function, then you must have some form of democratic mandate. This function could be of any kind. This mandate could be of any kind. It could be a direct mandate, indirect mandate, full mandate, semi-mandate, any form. But some resemblance of mandate is required. Mandate means you have some affiliation to the people, which means higher the democratic function, higher would be the democratic mandate. Lower the democratic function, less advanced the democratic function, less advanced or lighter the mandate. Let's take a few examples. For example, for you to be a minister, you've got to be an MP. If you're not an MP at the time of becoming a minister, you've got 6 months to become an MP. Because as a minister, you're discharging the democratic function of executing policy, of formulating it, of initiating legislation. Those are core democratic functions. And the least we expect you to be is a member of parliament. Elected, nominated, does not matter, as long as you are a member of parliament. Because even if you are a nominated member of parliament, you could be from the Rajya Sabha, you're becoming a minister because the majority party in the Lok Sabha who gets to choose government wants you to be a member of parliament. Similarly, only elected MLAs participate in the Rajya Sabha elections. We used to have Anglo-Indian nominations, we don't anymore, but if that was the case, this is how it would be executed. And thirdly, let us say, elected members of the Lok Sabha, elected members of the Rajya Sabha, and elected members of the legislative assemblies of the state and the union territories participate in the election. Because if you're choosing a Rajya Sabha member, you're choosing the very first citizen of the country. The least we expect you to be is elected. This is also the reason why elected will always be superior to the appointed. This is why most of the outcomes of bodies of any nature are recommendatory in nature, because they're at the end of the day appointed bodies. It could also apply to an advanced concept as that of ordinances. Why are ordinances temporary laws? Because the ultimate law-making authority is still the legislature, which is why once the legislatures come back in session, they've got 6 weeks to pass the ordinance, and if they don't, the ordinance automatically lapses. This is why directive principles are not enforceable in a court of law, because you can't force the government to make a certain policy. So many applications from a simple principle which is called democratic mandate. My second rule is a federal balance rule. Now the federal balance rule has 3 sub-rules to it. Rule 1, or the first step, center stronger than the states. It could be in any form. The center would exert some form of superiority over the states. Then you will try to please the states, appease the states, make the states feel that they've not been wronged. And when you actually check the doing, you'll realize the pleasing and the appeasement was hollow. and ultimately the center was still stronger than the states. Let me give you two examples. This is also a very widely used rule. Territorial changes. The states have no role to play or have no powers of territorial changes. So if I am dividing Uttar Pradesh into Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh Legislative Assembly has no role. So the center is stronger than the states. How do I appease UP? Because UP is going to be upset. The president, before introducing the bill to the parliament, and the president has to introduce because the president is symbolically elected by both the center and the states, so the presidential recommendation is needed, but also at the same time, before the president recommends this reorganization bill to the parliament, it will send the same bill for reference to the UP Legislative Assembly. Whatever the UP Legislative Assembly says or doesn't say, you can even put a time frame on it, is not binding on the president. So therefore, it is still hollow appeasement, and you would require all territorial changes to be passed through simple majority. You could also apply it to legislative relations. You have a union list, a state list, and a concurrent list, which means there is a clear division of power. But under extraordinary circumstances, the parliament can make a law on something in the state list. How? If the Rajya Sabha authorizes the parliament to do so. Now, the Rajya Sabha is a federal chamber, so the states are appeased. But ultimately, both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha will have to pass that law. Some cases, the center or the parliament can directly pass a law on something in the state list if you are implementing an international agreement or an obligation of an international document. That's rule number 2, federal balance. Then you've got rule number 3 and rule number 4, separation of powers and checks and balances. Separation of powers and checks and balances are related to the 3 branches of government, the L, E and J, the 3 branches of state, the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. Now the legislature, executive and judiciary are to be treated separately and also interdependently at the same time. They are the centers of power. So separation of powers has 2 sub-concepts, inter and intra. Trying to keep the legislature, executive and judiciary separate because they are independent sources of power, and in our case, because of a parliamentary democracy, correlated because of the legislature and the executive is cut out from the legislature. You still have to keep them separate because they perform 3 separate functions. Intra means within the legislature, within the executive, within the judiciary. So for example, you have very strict conditions on joint sittings. This is nothing but intra separation of powers. The conduct of a judge cannot be ordinarily discussed in the parliament. The conduct of the parliament cannot be ordinarily discussed in a court, is inter separation of powers. So you have very clear-cut concepts that apply to separation of powers. And because they are the 3 highest sources of power, the only people who are capable of keeping a check on one another are the legislature, executive and judiciary. So therefore, you have inter checks and balances and intra checks and balances. The legislature, the executive and the judiciary keeping a check on one another is checks and balances, which is intra. The legislature, executive and the judiciary separate from one another is intra checks and balances. Take a few examples. For example, the power of the judiciary to review the laws made by the legislature is judicial review, is nothing but an instrument of checks and balances. Similarly, the legislature can pass, the Lok Sabha specifically, can pass a no confidence motion against the executive and could lead to the dismissal of the executive. This is also inter checks and balances. The Rajya Sabha has limited powers with respect to a money bill. It's an application of rule number 2 and intra checks and balances. The judgments of the Supreme Court are binding on the High Court is nothing but intra checks and balances. So you will see several concepts within the Constitution that will apply. Emergency, center-state relations, parliament, state legislatures, separation of powers, checks and balances, judicial review, territory, all of this will somewhere be centered around our 4 golden rules. And finally, the prelims tactics. These are again my creation and they'll help you get the questions right more than anything else. My first tactic is the gray area. If your prelims question says according to the Constitution, as per the Constitution, as defined in the Constitution, it must be in the Constitution in black and white. So there's a prelim statement that says, as per the Constitution, judicial review is the power of the court to review legislative action. Theoretically, it is right. Factually, it is wrong because there is no word called judicial review in the Constitution. The first tactic. Second, the devil's advocate. Argue the opposite. If the opposite seems to be right, then therefore the primary statement goes wrong. Now, how does this work? For example, liberty is the absence of tyranny. So this means as long as there is no tyranny, there is definitely liberty. So does that mean democratic governments don't have difficult laws? They do. The statement is incorrect. Third, the reality check. Correlate to the most basic practical real life scenarios. Foreigners have a right to property. If foreigners didn't have a right to property, how would you have foreign direct investment? How would you have people settling in, running their businesses and home in India who were not Indians? So therefore, the statement is right. The sibling rivalry. A lot of times you will see statement 1 and statement 2 to be opposite of each other. For example, statement 1 will say directive principles are enforceable in a court of law. The second statement will say directive principles are not enforceable in a court of law. Both can't be right. Only one out of the two can be right. You will find these simple contradictions, complicated contradictions within the statements itself. Read them like a passage. And speaking of a passage, my final tactic, the simpleton. The simpleton idea is, at the end of the day, law is just fancy English. It's legal CSAT, if you would indulge me. So for example, you get a statement that says, a state is a community of people having independence with an authority to govern them and therefore some amount of culture. Pick out the keywords. What we are referring to is state, we are referring to sovereignty, we are referring to territory, we are referring to culture. Is that the most appropriate definition? You must extract the keywords. And once you've extracted the keywords, what you have before you is the most shortened definition of state. So state generally means sovereign, government, territory, and people. If you find these 4 words simply extracted from the option, what you have is the right option. And these are my 5 prelims tactics. With this, we finish the first lecture and see you soon in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.